Good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Friday, 6 June 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is actively engaged on multiple fronts, both domestically and internationally. Premier Li Qiang has expressed China's willingness to collaborate with Canada to foster a healthy and stable relationship amid ongoing trade tensions, signaling a potential reset in relations. China sought to portray a phone call between President Xi Jinping and President Trump as a dialogue between strong leaders aimed at maintaining stability amidst rising tensions. Following a trade war truce in May, shipping rates on China-US routes have surged as exporters vie for space, straining global freight markets due to a post-tariff export boom. President Trump announced that his top economic officials will meet with their Chinese counterparts in London next week to discuss trade. President Trump also stated that Xi Jinping agreed to allow rare earth minerals to flow to the U.S. after a recent phone call to resolve trade issues. China is making strides in its digital economy, with the National Data Administration, NDA, announcing the establishment of 10 national data pilot zones in regions like Beijing, Zhejiang, and Anhui to bolster its digital economy and compete with the United States in artificial intelligence. Regarding religious matters, President Xi Jinping met with the Panchen Lama, advocating for the continued Sinicization of religion, coinciding with the upcoming 90th birthday of the exiled Dalai Lama. In other news, a Chinese-led team discovered evidence of a matrilineal community dating back 4,500 years in Shandong, lasting 250 years. Chinese universities are implementing regulations that set requirements for the proportion of AI-generated content in these seas, addressing concerns about academic misconduct. The Chinese Coast Guard showcased one of its largest ships to Pacific Island ministers, highlighting its expanding high seas patrol capabilities. China aims to better play its role as a global green energy leader by reframing how it communicates its contribution to the global transition. Hong Kong is actively rebranding itself as a premier events destination, focusing on concerts and trade shows to attract high-spending tourists and diversify its appeal beyond mainland Chinese visitors, aiming to revitalize its image following protests, pandemic-related restrictions, and a security crackdown. Enacts chairman Yan considered listing his company on mainland exchanges or raising capital offshore, reflecting China's strong capital market presence. Turning to North Korea, a major internet outage is affecting the country's internet connectivity, impacting all routes, whether they come in via China or Russia. Across the Pacific, in the United States, following a trade war truce with China in May, shipping rates on China-US routes have skyrocketed as exporters vie for space, straining global freight markets due to a post-tariff export boom. President Trump announced that his top economic officials will meet with their Chinese counterparts in London next week to discuss trade. President Trump also stated that Xi Jinping agreed to allow rare earth minerals to flow to the U.S. after a recent phone call to resolve trade issues. Gillian Zackler, a philanthropist known for her contributions to U.S.-China relations, died at 84. She defended her husband Arthur Sackler's legacy, arguing that his involvement predated Purdue Pharma's role in the opioid crisis. In the latest from Canada, China and Canada have agreed to work to reset relations in a phone call between Premier Li Qiang and Prime Minister Mark Carney. Li expressed China's desire for a healthy and stable relationship after years of disruption. In France, central regions have been severely impacted by intense thunderstorms, including supercell storms that produced hailstones up to 6 cm in diameter, resulting in significant damage. Finally, heavy rainfall in southern China has triggered landslides and widespread disruption. United States job growth saw healthcare leading the way with 62,000 new positions, even as the federal government experienced a loss of 22,000 jobs, with the economy adding 139,000 jobs overall. A $2.80 billion settlement was approved by a federal judge, setting the stage for us colleges to potentially compensate their athletes as early as next month. The U.S. Supreme Court sided with the Trump administration, allowing members of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, to access sensitive Social Security Administration records during ongoing legal challenges. Yoga classes have resumed on San Diego beaches after a federal appeals court deemed a city ordinance restricting such activities unconstitutional, affirming that teaching yoga is protected speech. Kilma Rego Garcia, mistakenly deported to El Salvador, has been returned to the U.S. to face charges related to transporting undocumented migrants. Health security experts warn that the Trump administration's cuts to research and health budgets, including the cancellation of an MRI-Antrag, are weakening national pandemic flu defenses. President Trump has imposed a new blanket travel ban on 12 countries. President Donald Trump has signed executive orders aimed at bolstering America's drone industry, potentially disadvantaging Chinese manufacturers like DJI and Autel Robotics by tightening airspace security and enhancing military readiness. Turning to China, senior U.S. administration officials are scheduled to meet with a Chinese delegation in London for trade negotiations, following a very positive phone call between President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping amidst ongoing tariff disputes. President Trump announced a second round of trade talks with China in an attempt to resolve the tariffs war, which has seen disputes over China's restrictions on rare minerals and the U.S. revocation of student visas. Despite conciliatory rhetoric between President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump, manufacturers in China are exhibiting caution, delaying major decisions due to policy uncertainties and Trump's unpredictable behavior. Over 700 American scholars focused on China have signed a petition urging us Secretary of State Marco Rubio to halt proposed visa restrictions against Chinese students, fearing the impact on academic exchange and collaboration. Despite a U.S. port fee targeting ships linked to China, major shipping companies like Mediterranean Shipping Company, MSS, continue to order vessels from Chinese shipyards, citing their unmatched competitiveness. The absence of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio from preparations for the phone call between Chinese and U.S. leaders and subsequent trade talk announcements has raised questions about his influence in shaping bilateral ties. Meanwhile, in Australia, an online shopper reported that ghost stores are using fake tracking numbers to deceive payment platforms into believing goods have been delivered. Guardian Australia has tracked 140 such stores, which include those selling poor quality clothing, counterfeit labels, or failing to deliver anything at all. Australia's ski season is anticipated to start with significant snowfall, with up to 70 cm expected at higher resorts by Tuesday evening. As two cold fronts from the Great Australian Bight bring rain, storms, and hail across South Australia, Victoria, and New South Wales during the King's birthday long weekend. Ange Postecoglou was sacked as Tottenham manager, just 16 days after the Australian ended the club's 17-year trophy drought by winning the Europa League. Internationally, fresh sanctions will limit the International Criminal Court's ICC operational capacity, prompting intervention from the EU as the sanctions, which include a Slovenian judge on the blacklist, deal a blow to the ICC. In Lebanon, Orinokuko Ojiri, a BBC bargain hunt art expert, was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail for failing to report high-value art sales to Nazim Ahmad, who is suspected of financing the militant group Hezbollah. Finally, within the Gaza Strip, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, BHFF, which recently began distributing aid, has closed all its centers, citing security concerns. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has acknowledged arming Palestinian clans in Gaza, claiming it protects Israeli soldiers by countering Hamas. Reports indicate these clans have looted aid and have connections to jihadist groups. Yasser Abu Shabab, a Bedouin leader in eastern Rafah, heads one such Israeli-backed militia. The ongoing war in Gaza, coupled with aid restrictions, has created severe food shortages, with 500,000 Gazans facing imminent starvation, according to a UN report. Near an Israeli-backed distribution center in Gaza, nearly 50 people were killed and 300 wounded in chaotic incidents. Videos showed desperate scenes around these food sites, with Israeli troops opening fire in at least 2 instances, resulting in dozens of Palestinian deaths. Muslims in Gaza are observing Eid amidst devastation caused by Israeli attacks. The Israeli military reported the deaths of 4 soldiers in Gaza and requires thousands more troops for its offensive, increasing pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition. A young Palestinian girl was rescued from a burning building following an Israeli airstrike and is now hospitalized. Turning to Lebanon, the Lebanese army has cautioned that Israeli airstrikes could halt cooperation with the ceasefire committee. This warning follows Israeli military strikes on buildings in Beirut's southern suburbs, which Israel claims housed Hezbollah's drone production facilities. Israel has threatened further attacks on Lebanon if Hezbollah is not disarmed, asserting that Beirut will not be calm after launching its largest attack on the city since the ceasefire. Japan is currently navigating a complex landscape of economic adjustments, legal overhauls, and diplomatic engagements. Princess Kako of Akishino recently concluded an 11-day visit to Brazil, where she was honored with the highest order of Sao Paulo. Trade negotiations with the U.S. continue, with both nations yet to agree on revisiting U.S. tariffs. Demonstrating solidarity, 87 Japanese universities are providing support measures for international students in the U.S. following Harvard's ban. Domestically, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is prioritizing wage increases to surpass price hikes as a key economic strategy. His administration is also considering forming a panel to facilitate discussions about WWE after the summer upper house election. A new law in Japan now permits nuclear plants to operate beyond the previous 60-year restriction, compensating for interruptions caused by unforeseen events. This law, effective now, eases restrictions imposed after the Fukushima disaster. Paradoxically, a Japanese court overturned a 13.3 trillion yen damages verdict against former executives of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant operator. Farm Minister Shinjiro Koizumi has suggested the possibility of emergency rice imports if the government cannot lower prices, addressing public concerns over increasing costs amidst an upcoming national election. Ethical considerations are front and center, as Japan establishes guidelines for the responsible development of AI-controlled defense systems, according to Defense Minister Jin Nakatani. The Reciprocal Access Agreement, RAI, with the Philippines has been ratified, underscoring Manila's strategic importance as a defense ally. Following the death of a 20-year-old woman and a surge in cases, Japan's anti-stalking law is under review. Stalking cases have reached record highs since its enactment in 2000, prompting public outcry. Addressing healthcare access, Japan is considering mandatory health insurance for foreign tourists and plans to share defaulters' information with immigration authorities to prevent healthcare system abuse. Foreign tourists with outstanding medical bills may face entry denial under proposed legislative reforms aimed at addressing taxpayer-funded deficits. Additionally, concerns have surfaced regarding Japan's evaluation of foreign drivers, particularly regarding potential differences in the interpretation of traffic signs. In other developments, Japanese startup iSpace experienced a failed second lunar landing mission for its unmanned resilience craft, which likely crashed after contact was lost. A Japanese company also suspended construction of a $1.60 billion factory in South Carolina slated to produce batteries for electric BMWs, citing policy and market uncertainty. Kotohira, situated in the mountains of western Kagawa Prefecture, has thus far managed to avoid the negative impacts of over-tourism. Russia views its ongoing war in Ukraine as existential, with violence escalating and peace talks stalled. Following Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb attack on Kremlin bombers and a subsequent covert Ukrainian attack that destroyed dozens of Russian bombers, Russia launched intense retaliatory missile and drone barrages on Kyiv and other Ukrainian territories. These attacks resulted in multiple deaths and injuries, including in Kyiv, where at least 6 people were killed and about 80 injured. President Trump stated that Vladimir Putin warned of retaliation for the Ukrainian attacks. In Africa, the Wagner Group is withdrawing from Mali after more than 3.5 years fighting Islamic extremists, to be replaced by the Kremlin-backed Africa Corps, indicating a more fundamental level of Russian support in the region. A British government advisor, Jonathan Hall, warns of an extraordinary threat from Russian and Iranian plots, stating hostile states are paying local criminals to carry out acts of violence, espionage, and intimidation. According to Fiona Hill, a government defense expert, Russia is at war with Britain, and the US is no longer a reliable ally. Turning to Ukraine, the nation continues to endure intense Russian attacks, including a recent barrage of over 400 drones and 40 missiles. These attacks, which Volodymyr Zelensky attributed to Russia, have resulted in casualties, including deaths of emergency workers in Kyiv. These attacks came after Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb attack on Kremlin bombers. Zelensky also commented that Russian truck drivers who transported platforms for Ukraine's drone attack on Russian warplanes did so unwittingly. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, an extraordinary threat from Russian and Iranian plots has been identified by British government advisor Jonathan Hall. Hall warns that these hostile states are paying local criminals to carry out acts of violence, espionage, and intimidation. Government defense expert Fiona Hill has also stated that Russia is at war with Britain, and the US is no longer a reliable ally. She advised the UK to become more cohesive and resilient to respond to these threats. Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is under fire for extending an invitation to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the upcoming G7 summit held in Alberta, Warsaw. This decision follows the Canadian Federal Police's conclusion that the assassination of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar was directed by the highest levels of the Indian government. Carney has not commented on whether he believes Modi was personally involved. Simultaneously, over 200 wildfires are burning across Canada, concentrated in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. The resulting heavy smoke is causing significant air quality issues in the Midwest and Northeast regions of the United States. Climate change is suggested by experts to be a contributing factor, potentially increasing the frequency of such events. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has accepted Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's invitation to the G7 summit in Canada. This move suggests a possible thaw in relations after recent diplomatic tensions linked to the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Modi has stated his anticipation for a meeting with Carney. United States. The United States is currently experiencing degraded air quality in its Midwest and Northeast regions. This is due to heavy smoke drifting south from over 200 wildfires burning in Canada, particularly in the provinces of Manitoba and Saskatchewan. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, inaugurated a strategically vital railway in Jammu and Kashmir, his first visit following recent tensions with Pakistan. This railway, a feat of engineering with 36 tunnels and 943 bridges, aims to connect Udhampur, Srinagar and Baramulla, integrating the Kashmir Valley more closely with the rest of India. While officials tout its benefits, many Kashmiris see the railway as reinforcing Indian government control. Elsewhere, India's Air Force is grappling with an aging fleet and procurement delays, impeding its expansion. Tesla's ambition to manufacture vehicles in India is also facing obstacles, with a senior minister questioning the company's dedication. In a separate incident, 4 individuals, including a representative from Royal Challengers Bengaluru, were arrested after a fatal stampede during a victory celebration they orchestrated. Turning to Singapore, blogger Meet Singh, of Indian origin, was fined for posting racially charged remarks on TikTok targeting Singapore Minister Josephine Teo. United Kingdom's High Court is taking urgent action to address AI misuse after lawyers presented fabricated, potentially AI-generated, case law.c. The UK government is under fire for declining to force tech firms to disclose their AI model training methods. Creative industries are accusing ministers of dishonesty in protecting copyrights against AI companies. Regarding international diplomacy, the UK, alongside France and other Western nations, will not recognize Palestine at an upcoming conference in Saudi Arabia. Following deadly strikes, Ukraine's President Zelensky is urging for increased pressure on Russia, stating that inaction equals complicity. Former U.S. President Trump, in a meeting with Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz, described the Russia-Ukraine conflict as a dispute between children. The Saudi Arabia conference, initially designed to push Western governments towards recognizing a Palestinian state, is now aiming for consensus on steps leading to recognition. France recently marked the 81st anniversary of D-Day in Normandy, a solemn occasion drawing thousands to remember the Allied invasion of World War II. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth attended a ceremony in Colville-sur-Mer, France, honoring the soldiers who perished during the historic landings. Meanwhile, Interpol, based in Lyon, France, coordinated operations spanning Europe and the Americas, leading to the arrest of 20 people across 12 countries for distributing child sex abuse material. In a case sparking legal and political debate, El Salvador became the unexpected location of Kilma Armando Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident legally shielded from deportation, after he was mistakenly deported there on March 15 and subsequently detained. Following this incident, the United States saw Abrego Garcia's return, only to face charges of illegally transporting individuals within the country. Adding to the complexity, a federal prosecutor reportedly resigned, citing concerns over the politically motivated nature of Abrego Garcia's indictment. Meanwhile, the United States also witnessed a positive turn for Tesla stocks after White House officials facilitated a call between CEO Elon Musk and President Donald Trump, an effort to mediate their public disagreement. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz engaged in discussions with President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, hoping to transform their report into tangible policy outcomes. Merz described Trump as open to discussion and confident in Washington's commitment to NATO. Meanwhile, BioNTech, a German firm, finalized a licensing deal worth billions of dollars with Bristol Myers Squibb Company, a U.S. pharmaceutical corporation, for a cancer treatment initially developed in China. The allure of Harvard's U.S. brand, representing academic excellence, held significant appeal for those raised in West Germany. Pakistan faces continued pressure from the United States to actively combat terrorism, with a U.S. lawmaker emphasizing the need to address Jaish-e-Mohammed, the group responsible for the murder of journalist Daniel Pearl. Adding to the nation's challenges, a government school in northwest Pakistan was bombed, continuing a troubling trend. Local NGOs report over 450 schools in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province have been destroyed in similar attacks over the past decade, severely disrupting education. United States policy saw the Trump administration enact a travel ban, severely restricting entry for foreign nationals from 19 countries. A move drawing criticism for family separations and its impact on vulnerable populations, despite some available waivers. Kilma Armando Abrego Garcia, wrongly deported to El Salvador, faced arrest and trafficking charges upon re-entry, as stated by Attorney General Pam Bondi. This case underscores the intricate outcomes of current immigration enforcement strategies. The administration's aims to transfer migrants to potentially hazardous countries spark legal and ethical debate, especially considering existing laws and migrant welfare. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faced scrutiny over the SNC-Lavalin affair, involving allegations of political interference in a criminal prosecution. The controversy centered on whether Trudeau's office pressured then Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould to offer SNC-Lavalin, a Quebec-based engineering firm, a deferred prosecution agreement to avoid a criminal trial on bribery and fraud charges related to contracts in Libya. The affair sparked a political crisis, leading to resignations and raising questions about the independence of the judiciary. Moving to the United Kingdom, Brexit negotiations continued to dominate the political landscape, with ongoing debates about the terms of withdrawal from the European Union. Prime Minister Theresa May struggled to secure parliamentary support for her proposed deal, leading to political instability and uncertainty about the future relationship between the UK and the EU. The key sticking points included the Irish border issue and the future trade arrangements. In France, President Emmanuel Macron's government faced ongoing protests and social unrest, particularly from the Gilets Jaunes, Yellow Vests, movement. These protests, initially sparked by fuel tax increases, evolved into broader demonstrations against economic inequality and perceived government elitism. Macron responded with policy concessions and dialogue initiatives, but the unrest highlighted deep divisions within French society. South Korea saw Lee Jae-myung win the presidential election, a result seen by many as preventing a shift towards authoritarian governance. In the immediate aftermath, President Lee and then U.S. President Trump forged an agreement to accelerate tariff negotiations. In unrelated news, the ex-girlfriend of a South Korean pop star received a 1-year suspended sentence for threatening to release a compromising video. Turning to Italy, Niall Won-chung is set to break barriers as the first Asian conductor to take the helm at the renowned La Scala Opera House, Philippines. Authorities in the Philippines have apprehended the head of the JP Dragon criminal syndicate. The syndicate is accused of working with a fraud organization based in the Philippines, headed by an individual nicknamed Luffy and involving former members of Japanese gangs. Meanwhile, the Philippines armed forces are scaling up their investment in drones and drone defense systems. This investment is motivated by rising concerns over the potential use of drones by China to bolster its claims in contested maritime territory. Taiwan is facing increased scrutiny over the influence of TikTok, with a Doublethink Lab survey revealing that frequent users are more susceptible to pro-China unification narratives. Concerns among Taiwanese politicians have also surfaced regarding potential marginalization after a phone call between Chinese President Xi Jinping and then U.S. President Donald Trump, during which all exercised caution concerning Taiwan. Mexico recently mourned the loss of 2 Guatemalan pilots and a Mexican agronomist engineer in a plane crash in the south, all of whom were working to eradicate the screw worm. Simultaneously, the Organization of American States has expressed worries about the low participation rates in Mexico's judicial elections. Adding to the country's concerns, the commencement of hurricane season has brought rough surf and dangerous swimming conditions to Mexico's Pacific coast. Guatemala is experiencing volcanic unrest as the volcano of fire erupted, prompting evacuations of nearby residents due to gas and ash emissions. In the United States, the Department of Homeland Security carried out raids in Los Angeles, leading to protests. Masked agents were seen removing individuals from various locations, including Home Depot stores and the Ambient Apparel headquarters, with immigration advocates reporting widespread activity across the city. Brazil is seeing a notable decline in its Catholic population. The 2022 census revealed only 56.7% identify as Catholic, a sharp decrease from 82.9% 30 years ago. Simultaneously, evangelical communities are expanding. Regarding environmental concerns in Brazil, deforestation in the Amazon surged dramatically. They saw a 92% increase compared to the previous year. The deforested area surpasses the size of New York City. South Sudan's already precarious situation was further complicated when a deportation flight, originating from Texas and carrying 8 individuals, was rerouted to Djibouti due to obstacles. The flight's original mission was to return the deportees to South Sudan, a nation struggling with internal conflict. Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth is calling on Indo-Pacific nations to boost their defense budgets to 5% of GDP. This is seen as a move to effectively challenge China's growing regional power. Shifting to Singapore, the private members club 1880 has shuttered its Hong Kong branch. Meanwhile, in related news, there's growing interest in the methods Japanese men are using to maintain their youthfulness. The United States finds itself in a delicate situation as a U.S. court order grounded a deportation flight bound for South Sudan, leaving 8 deportees and 13 ICE officers stuck in Djibouti. They are reportedly experiencing illness while housed in a converted shipping container. Hungary saw its prime minister enact a ban on LGBTQ symbols on government buildings just before Budapest Pride, prompting legal challenges. Turning to India, the nation is receiving support from Central Asian countries in its fight against terrorism, and Prime Minister Modi has accepted Canadian Prime Minister Carney's invitation to the G7 summit. Across Africa, the new U.S. travel ban, impacting 7 nations on the continent, is being widely viewed as discriminatory. In Niger, the International Committee of the Red Cross has shuttered its offices and removed foreign staff, complying with an order from the ruling junta issued 4 months ago. Meanwhile, in Panama, President José Raúl Mulino has invited an archbishop and a rabbi to mediate with striking banana workers amidst nearly 2 months of social unrest. Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister James Marape has announced that an upcoming meeting between his government and Bougainville marks a crucial step in post-referendum discussions. Looking at Europe, the Netherlands is gearing up for elections on October 29th, following the government's collapse, with polls suggesting a close contest between the far-right PVV party and the Labour-Green Left alliance. In South America, Bolivia's Electoral Tribunal has included leftist Senate leader Andrónico Rodriguez on the list of presidential candidates, while excluding former leader Evo Morales. Over in Southeast Asia, Vietnam continues to attract substantial foreign investment, especially in manufacturing and industrial real estate, despite significant U.S. tariffs. Ghana saw Interpol issue a red notice for its former finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, after he failed to appear for prosecutor summons related to corruption allegations. Thailand experienced a Chinese national who escaped from Thai police custody by jumping from a second-story window, being recaptured 200 kilometers away. In the Middle East, Jordanians are celebrating their football team's historic first-time qualification for a FIFA World Cup, secured after a victory in Oman. Slovenia has urged the EU to activate its blocking statute in response to US sanctions targeting International Criminal Court judges. Finally, in Myanmar, opium poppy cultivation and methamphetamine production have surged amid the ongoing civil war. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.